has anything to say about the deindustrialization of this country.
Georgian townhouses on the moon, the highest GDP per capita in the Milky Way. Small modular reactors under every village green. This is Anglo-Futurism. Welcome back to the King Charles III Space Station. I'm Tom O.
And I'm Calum Drysdale.
And Calum and I, obviously living in this space station together, have had ample opportunity to get down to a podcast. And yet circumstance has delayed us.
Quite right. We've been delayed by, I think, exogenous factors. Is that fair to say?
No. No, I think it was endogenous insofar as Calum didn't want to do one at 7 a.m. I didn't want to do one at 10 p.m. We've decided that we need an elaborate Wallace and Gromit construction whereby we get flipped out of our beds, tumbled downwards, get put into our kind of podcasting trousers, all in the same
boiler
motion.
suits.
Our podcasting boiler suits, all in the same motion as we arrive in front of the microphone, which is where we are now. So welcome back, everyone. Here we are at the bar,
And you're looking very dashing in your boiler suit, Tom.
well,
It's dirty work.
You.
It's dirty work, but we're dressed for the occasion.
You look almost as good in your boiler suit as you look in your Anglo-futurist pajamas, which I'm reliably informed that you wear to bed every night with your Anglo-futurist nightcap.
They are a lovely pair of jammies.
But we have some news, which is that we hosted some drinks, which by all accounts were a roaring success.
We would say that, wouldn't we?
No, of course. This is a propaganda podcast. Like, of course, we think it was a roaring success. But it was great to see a few of you there. We hosted it at the Iron Duke in Mayfair, which historically minded listeners will, of course, know is named after the Duke of Wellington, who is a favourite of this podcast.
Well, and it was also the name of a Navy flagship, one of the early Ironside battleships.
Oh, really? And did it see any action?
I can't tell you actually that. I largely know that. I largely know that because we were thinking of naming all the bioreactors that we build after the flagships of the Royal Navy, sort of similarly like large steel buckets.
What are our aircraft carriers called at the moment?
The Queen Elizabeth and the Prince of Wales.
I feel like people won't know that they're bioreactors when you first name them.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose as well, they're kind of almost the opposite of a ship, right? In that a bioreactor is meant to keep the liquid in, whilst the ship does the very opposite. So I suppose maybe we could find like the inverse of the name, like I don't know, the Iron Duke is thus replaced by I don't know the Cotton Wool Duke, and that way we somewhat approximate the function of the bioreactor.
It was disappointing that when Trump and Starmer unveiled their $150 billion investment deal, they did not mention bioreactors. I'm sure you were sitting there going, "Oh, rats!"
No. It's because obviously the Americans can't actually. They've got nothing that they can provide to us. So here with our comparative advantage, Tom, I'm actually going over next week, and I will, the Americans will all sit down and
they
be
would
very
pay
grateful.
$150 billion for your kind of poo processing devices.
Exactly. They've got nothing to teach us.
But I rather enjoyed Trump's historic, unprecedented second state visit.
Go on. Why was that, Tom? Other than the keynote?
Well, Well, this is the thing. It was keynote. It was there was a lot of pomp, of which there is a dearth.
But more so than any of the other state appearances. Like, why was this? What was it about this one? Because I know people were suggesting that he'd walked in front of the king inappropriately.
Yeah, I was concerned about that when I saw the footage. But I'm assured by friends who are better royal watchers than me that it is not, in fact, a breach of decorum. But I think the pomp thing is worth coming back to because clearly Trump has a taste for it. It was laid on thick. I mean, it did occur to me that had that bullet gone, had it got another kind of inch to the right, then President Harris might have been visiting and they would have been inspecting the Peckham boys, and like having street food and like being present while St. James's Park was named like Rosa Parks. It would have been pretty grim. And say what you like about Trump, but I think it's very nice for us to see Britain kind of put on its best suit.
Yeah. Although at the same time, it is sad.
What, like a minstrel show?
Yeah, it is sad that we feel that only when we have someone who would enjoy it, some sort of external stimulus or trigger, that it does happen, right? It makes me feel ever more that we are Museum Britain in that sense, that if you only do it when the guests come round, you only bring out the fine china when the guests are around, and the rest of the time you use the enamelware.
I think at the same time though that sometimes it can be uplifting to see yourselves as others see you, to misquote Robert Burns. Like in Trump's in Trump's state banquet speech, he was, I mean, I've got it in front of me because it's kind of extraordinary. He was so of course when you go somewhere and you're a president, you sort of
you lay it on thick and Tom,
you blow smoke up the arse. That's the phrase that I'm grasping for. You blow smoke up the arse of your host.
And Tom, you have your arse wide open to receive that smoke.
Well, I certainly hope the king did. I'm sure I'm sure he was diplomatically pursed, but Trump didn't just say we have a great relationship, as he might if you were visiting the French. He said we're like two notes in one chord or two verses of the same poem, each beautiful on its own but really meant to be played together. And I feel that kind of language actually goes beyond the normal kind of state visit level of language. Like, this is a real Anglophile. And it warmed my cockles to see someone just really appreciating. I mean, I say he was really appreciating it. He also said today, when asked what he had for dinner in the state banquet, that he ate whatever the hell they served us, and that he'd seen more paintings than any human ever saw, both of which I think are quite ambivalent. But he was having a lovely time, and it was very pleasant as a foaming-mouthed nationalist.
Yeah, sure. No. I do agree with you in that, but I still think there is the problem is if you are accepting sort of there's the phrase beware those who come with gifts, right? In that they arrive, huge amount of money given in, very exciting, very promising, and actually maybe should. I mean, I've seen people saying that we should really question all of our antagonism towards the green energy investing. That actually this might turn out just that actually Miliband has done rather well by being so aggressive about it and by front loading a lot of this pain. I'm not going to come down either one way or the other, but I do think it was interesting the people saying how having Britain be tightly aligned to the US was an important goal now that we've disengaged from the European Union. And that it is I have no doubt State Department policy that Britain should be kept firmly in its vassal state. We had James Kingston on the podcast talking about just how much money,
spoiler alert,
is flowing through like our offshore territories, the Cayman Islands, and this is American money. That a lot of this is American capital that is going and being deployed, being deployed in Britain. It is good for us, but it also, a leash has a loop and a handle, and it's pretty clear, it seems, which end is which in that relationship.
Sure. But if we are ever going to regain the whip hand, then it's good for us at this stage to have talent in the country and capital in the country. I think it's probably the case that all of this would have happened anyway if like Trump hadn't come on the state visit and needed a piece of paper to sign theatrically. But I think we must concede that you and I are not economists.
No.
But
I'm
contrary to popular belief,
I'm on my second book of economics, and it's filling me with the zeal of the idiot.
But Ambrose Evans Pritchard in the Telegraph pointed out something that seemed quite significant and underplayed in the deal, which is that there's been this deal within a deal whereby a UK tech company is going to help provide advanced reactor fuel to the US market, and I think that will make us the only country outside. I think the US and Russia.
I think it was Russia
to be doing that, which sets us up very well.
Yeah. And actually, maybe the real lesson is things aren't quite as bad as all that. As the most like technically advanced and like bold country in Europe, even with our small size, we punch massively above our weight.
Yeah, AEP, who's the Telegraph columnist I just mentioned, had a very funny sign-off on this. He was talking about how the right has been whinging about net zero for years, and the left has been whinging about Brexit. But his view is that despite everything, the clean energy thing looks like it's going to work out in the medium term. And so he waspishly signed off with the words, "The dogs will bark, but the caravan rolls on," which is something that I really want to incorporate into my day-to-day lexicon, I think.
Oh, lucky me in the morning. The dog may bark. All right, Tommy.
When Calum's next giving me a hard time.
Cup of tea, is it?
But yes, I think it's an interesting time to be following the fortunes of patriotism in this country. State visit, Tommy Robinson March, flagging,
which our hinterland remains unflagged, Tom, doesn't it?
Well, it does. It does. Obviously, we couldn't comment on any activity that we might be might be soon to undertake. But rest assured, the King Charles III space station has a St. George's flag.
Heavily adorned,
being pummeled by the radiation in lower Earth orbit. So we had to replace them very frequently, unfortunately.
That's very true. Very true. Yes, the march that, depending on who you ask, there were 3 million or 110,000, or even I heard some people say 56,000.
Well, there was footage from like the Sky Chopper or something, and it definitely looked like a lot more than 50,000. And I will say a lot less than 3 million. Yeah,
I mean the Met said 110, which obviously for those anti-fascists out there is very alarming, because far more than we're at Cable Street, Tom.
Yeah, well, I was passing through on my bicycle afterwards when people were still in the kind of, there were still some people sort of milling around, as has been documented by the press, there were some thugs there who were throwing bottles and being
still
violent.
At the end.
And hey,
still at the end.
No, not at the end. I'm about to say that. Well, yeah, I'm supplying this caveat because what I saw was just pretty gentle. Families leaving and people clearly having had like quite a nice time and like talking like very civilly about the kind of country they wanted, and it wasn't just like white skinheads, it was people of various ages and like various ethnicities.
Not of course that there's anything wrong, Tom, with being a white skinhead. those alopecia affected, young white men.
No. Of course not. Nothing wrong with being a skinhead. This is a DEI friendly podcast. But it was very striking to see the statue of Boudica with flags kind of fluttering. Very strange sight to see so many flags in central London. Frankly.
Yeah.
But then again, like I was on Westminster Bridge, which is where the Boudica statue is, as you know, and I was wheeling my bike down to Waterloo, and then there was this like row of tuk-tuks, and blaring their awful music. Probably just like I think the riders were just completely oblivious to what was going on, which also put it in perspective somewhat. Kind of the UK, as it were, just rumbles on.
Yeah. I mean, this is. It was one day, a bit of a day out for some people. I think, as some people have pointed out, many people were like from outside London. Compared to the situation in London, like as in the sort of demographic change, it's like a drop in the bucket, right?
Well, the vast majority of people in this country just have no idea what happened, nor should they. Probably a lot of them just like don't watch the news or like read the papers.
Frankly, don't care.
Yeah. I mean that's.
It was a fairly sunny Saturday.
It was. And then I trundled home, and the following day I was reading Abundance by Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson, which perhaps we can chat about briefly. I think it just has some relevance to Anglo-futurism, being as it is the kind of totem of like leftist progressive-minded progressivism.
So what the things that we share with the abundance agenda is that we want abundance of St. George's flags, but that's where we divert.
I mean, look, I would say Abundance the book is longer on the futurism than the Anglo. That's for sure. I was quite enjoying the commentary on X recently, to the effect. I think it was actually the Nishkanon Center that suggested a few different kinds of like progress thoughts or like progress vibes, and one of them was dark abundance.
Well, obviously, you like the sound of that.
Well, no, I think in the kind of Yarvin taxonomy, I should be a hobbit. Maybe you're more of a dark elf.
What in the classic podcast dichotomy of I think this was what Rose said, right? Every podcast.
Rose Lydon of
Foidcast fame. I suppose now
interviewing Curtis Yarvin right now.
Every podcast should have a hobbit and a dark elf.
Yeah. So she said she agrees that I'm the hobbit and you are. I'm a dark hobbit and you're a dark elf.
Okay. Oh, I'll accept
I thought you
that.
might find it slightly offensive that you're not classified as a hobbit.
No, really? No. The hobbits are the sort of the passive acceptors of things.
Really? I was thinking in terms of like a Tolkien hobbit.
No.
Where I just I want to live in Bag End and water my marrows and stump about in like magnificent corduroy suits.
What, marry Rosie Cotton or
something like that. A part of me just really wants to be my favorite cameo character in Lord of the Rings. I've forgotten his name. Are you going to say
Tom Bombadil?
No, no, absolutely not. There's a hobbit who occurs only very briefly, and I think like the heroes are returning. And he's so they don't have the Scouring the Shire in the films. They just return to Hobbiton, which is continuing as it always has. And so these heroes who've saved Middle-earth arrive, and this old grouchy hobbit, just one of them looks up. He's sweeping his front step. He looks up and then he just scowls, and then he goes straight back to sweeping, which I think is a very sort of innocent and admirable life that he has.
Well, obviously in the books he would then have been in a tenement block, all sharing 10 families all sharing one standpipe.
If in the Scouring of the Shire scenario, like if leftism had arrived in the Shire.
No, if the Manchester Liberals had arrived. Although I have to say, actually, I have found myself drifting, I fear, towards Manchesterism.
Why is that?
having sort of thought myself a young Englander, ready to defend the genteel hierarchies of like a modern and enlightened feudalism, I've actually found myself torn by. I mean, it was this book I'm reading, The Clash of Economic Ideas, and particularly the idea of how much easier it is to understand the interests of like producers rather than consumers. So this is specifically on like the Corn Laws, and how by introducing tariffs to try and protect a group, it feels like that raises the performance or the quality or the production of that group. But there is one of the points made in sort of opposition to it was about candle makers, and that actually, in order to boost the candle making industry, we should force everyone to shut their blinds because the sun is coming in like for free. And would the economy not do so much better if we would boost the whaling industry and the vegetable industry and the tallow industry and the candlestick making industry? But it's futile effort. It's wasted effort. And actually, maybe I fear that our beloved hobbit, who is sweeping his step, might have been able to secure higher wages working in a light industry.
I don't think he was paid to sweep. I think this was his own front step.
No.
I don't think there. Who does the cleaning in Hobbiton?
No, but he could still sweep. He could still sweep his tenement flat. But his life might have been improved by going and deploying his fastidious nature in an industrial setting.
Very abundant of him.
Very, very abundant. The question in this case is, were they flogging the people who played, I don't know, the TikToks on the card in the newly scoured Shire?
Well, this is the thing about dark abundance. I think there are, like I think it's not kind of fully set out what this might mean, but I think there are basically two potential strands of dark abundance.
It's not set out anything. It's
just people goofing around on
goofing around.
In fact, I intend to write about it for unheard.com, to which you can subscribe.
No,
I know we've had a plug recently. Okay, the way I see it, there are two different kinds of there could be two different kinds of dark abundance. One is aggressive reform of the state in the way that enables the creation of abundance, chopping through it, applying the Millet chainsaw.
Critically here, this is supply side reform, right?
Yeah.
That allow manufacture, allow production.
Well, it's reform of government machinery so that you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, but in many cases, it's stripping back, right? It's what, again, I've like a man who has read one book, I'm going to refer to my one book. Like what happened after Indian independence in the Permit Raj, when
Calum, you're so knowledgeable. Listeners, this stuff is not on his hippocampus. It's like right in his short-term memory.
I've actually written it down on my thigh. No, but in that, like, the idea was that a developing economy needed like to be strictly governed and strictly controlled, and there were infinite like quotas and permits that you had to fill out, and it actually meant that nothing really happened, that it was too much work to import machines, import steel, produce anything, because you were only allowed to do X million tons of steel, and once that quota was filled, no more could be filled. That's the world we live in at the moment, is the suggestion, right?
Yeah. Where judges say that like the kind of warehouse workers must earn the same as the kind of shop floor workers. And,
yeah, exactly.
All that kind of stuff.
Well, or on a more like maybe or like sensitive point, that like you have to provide subsidized housing in places because otherwise workers wouldn't be able to like live there, right? It's in many ways it's like a subsidy for underpaid work. And rather than actually saying, let's like force people who, if they want to pay someone to do like lower paid work, you just have to pay them.
You're forcing the economy to act like the economy you want rather than behave as the economy
But in this case, the forcing here is done with permits, while you prefer it done with a cane.
I think, ideally this stuff would happen naturally. You wouldn't have to kind of sacrifice all this productivity to force people and entities to behave in a way that's not in their interests.
Sorry, are you saying now about the because the whole point of dark abundance, right, is that there is a second part to the state, which is that not only do you need to like get out of the way of productive, well, the factors of production. Again, that's a new word I learned. New phrase, yeah.
When you read the dictionary, you're going to be flying.
Total sued. But also that there are some things that like only the government can do, i.e., like enforce property rights, enforce like behavior, and you have these institutions that have to be provided, like the courts, and that those are that's like the second part of the bargain that has been like massively ignored by the state in favor of like dabbling in everyone's economic business. They haven't remembered that, for example, the courts have this massive backlog, which actually, if common law and British law is so desirable, it undermines that if you have to wait like a year for a judgment.
Yeah, I think this is why lots of rape cases are being dropped at the moment, right? Because it could be like years before someone gets sentenced.
Yeah, and you're forcing women to like, not just relive it in this short horrible period, but years and years later have to then like dredge through their memory.
Horrid. So this kind of pertains to the second part of Dark Abundance, which I think someone posited this example of like a gleaming maglev carriage or whatever, like the kind of thing that Thompson and Klein imagine at the opening of the book. But people aren't going to ride it if there might be some maniac who's going to stab them, as unfortunately happened recently in the States. The kind of abundance that they write about is great and lovely and like designed in an effective altruist lab to be totally inoffensive. But it doesn't solve every problem.
Yeah, and maybe in like less America-brained reading, Tom. Like just we had a comment. We had a comment on the podcast. Someone saying, "Oh, I was with you on the deregulation, but once you worried about the civilizational risks of people not paying their bus fares, it all felt a bit ridiculous." But the point is, if you don't keep up these like basic things, the commons degrades. Actually, I was on a bus today. A guy tried to sort of slip past, and the bus driver impressively and unusually basically said, "No, get off. I'm not gonna go if you don't get off," because it doesn't work that way. And as we've seen in so many different cases, not only do we have to do you have to have people pay to keep the service running, but also people who will like push through the barriers or skip their fares are then often much more likely to then have committed other crimes. So you're creating this like selection effect where you're allowing like bad actors into a space. I mean, again, people talk about like one of the big reasons that a lot of Americans like shopping at Costco, which I don't think we really have an equivalent here, where you have to have a membership, is that it creates a far like more pleasant experience, because there's like institutional friction that prevents like basically disordered people from coming into this space and basically as I said again, degrading the commons. And that by creating this like friction, you see it in other ways, like when I think it was Johnson closed all a lot of the police stations, even though there was no like net loss in police officers, because there weren't police officers nearby anymore, you saw like big spikes in criminality around those old police stations. Because in a similar way, having the police there acts as a deterrent. So I mean, I think we've said about caning Well, I've tried to pin you down to saying that you want.
You did
want
not try to
cake.
pin me down.
but that is the like second part of it, that people are saying that like the more like left wing friendly interpretation like fails to grasp of like what it takes to run a modern civilization.
But Drew Pavlu, this Australian commentator, so the Dark Abundance is basically like the Abundance book, plus From Third World to First by Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah, although Lee Kuan Yew doesn't need Ezra Klein, right? Like he feels like he worked it out pretty well.
Yeah,
well
he
himself.
did perfectly well without Klein. Like maybe today some of these ideas would be useful. But it does sadden me that the solution to the rapidly rising disorder we're seeing in this country, so shoplifting as well as like phone thefts and stabbing, it dismays me that the solution might be lictors on the street who'll thrash offenders. I certainly don't share some of the online rights enthusiasm for the mega prison like sinecures in El Salvador. I think it's that clearly most El Salvadorans are much better off for the existence of that culture now. Like the murder rate has cratered, but it's a devastating indictment of the society that they created that should be necessary.
I'm not sure if I share your attitude on this. I know the stat that I love to trot out at this point from maybe not from this book, not from the book that I'm reading at the moment, but from a different one, is that like Britain through the 19th century, the 19th or 18th. Actually, listeners, you might have to take my vague wavings at this one. Was executing 16 times as many people as like the second most like lethal government, which was the Prussians. I suppose that puts it before German unification. Again, maybe take that with a pinch of salt. But the point there is, we were known as a country of like alcoholic, badly educated brutes who
Gin Lane,
who killed a whole load of their own
country,
and the
hang happy,
and we should look at like the relative idyll of the Victorian, the late Victorian Edwardian and through to the 20th century
Jack
period.
the Who.
But as like the product of like a pacification of the country. Now, obviously, there's like the Christian evangelicals, going and doing their own work as well. But I don't think that it should be regarded as a sad thing. It's part of life. That there are like again, there's a this is to show our intellectual origins. There's a tweet that always goes around that you are at the mercy of the bottom quintile. That you whatever you do, you are always at the mercy of like this group of people who are like disordered, unreliable, and all like laws and regulations basically have to be built to the lowest common denominator.
I wouldn't disagree with any of that. What I'm saying is that I don't particularly relish all this harsh stuff that is probably necessary if you want to remove violent criminality from your society. I mean, there's probably a slightly less dark version of this where
mauve abundance.
Where grey abundance just sounds so awful, so we can't bill it as that. But a version where if you're some Ute, some roadman or rude boy who commits a couple of non-trivial offences, then maybe just get locked up until your frontal lobe comes through.
Well, yeah. Again, although on the other hand,
your prefrontal cortex. Even.
If you regard, I've seen people say that if you treat, if you say that like
because the criminality massively reduces, like once you're past your mid-20s. I mean, at the moment, you're basically over the head as a criminal now.
Yeah, but at the moment we think of we like excuse and like youth acts as mitigation, right? So we say that you can't be blamed for your actions when you're young. I've seen other people say that if you like, if everyone,
anything,
if everyone has like a basic rate of criminality, so i.e., on a given day you have a probability of committing a crime, you get what's then called like a Poisson distribution of like criminality, i.e., like as time goes on, the chance of you committing a crime basically gets higher and higher. And the point of that is, if you're committing a crime as a young person, your like probability of committing a crime is actually much higher, and you're then more likely to go on and commit future crimes, i.e., you should be locked up much more harshly. Which isn't necessarily a thing that I think has entered popular discourse, but it's an interesting idea on this like informed and rational policy making on the like, you know, how do we have a genteel society that doesn't mean that we're like at the mercy of like
this is the dividing line, the kind of progressives who would have us who are happy with the status quo, whereby violent criminals are let loose many times over, don't see much jail time. That view, I think, makes sense if you want it to be, if you want to live in a present that you feel is kind. If you are more of a futurist, perhaps, then you accept that we are just partway through the process of refining society and figuring out how to minimize violence and the threat of violence. Like I think people who think that the amount of violence currently today is acceptable, I think, are very naive.
It's a good point you make there about the people living in the present, because again, there was a good.
They're not thinking several generations hence.
Well, and but this is
right
why,
now.
This is why people feel so strongly about like the aged, right? That we've had numbers coming out about the triple lock and just how much it's going to cost us, and the protests, and but particularly like France, right? You look at France, where you have protests, supposedly these like 68 who are, revolutionaries and now demanding. I mean, actually they're actually all conservative voting, but that you're having the country like grind to a standstill because people are saying no, we should lower the retirement age.
And that retard.
Well,
more
like it seems like that is a perfect example of that principle you say, right? Of a group of people who live solely in the present, and for them, like I'm all right, Jack, and have no consideration then of like the future effects. The IMF bailout will come after I'm dead. Thank you very much.
Well, not thinking about it in those terms, they're just rationalizing what they feel to be a fair deal for themselves, not appreciating, I think, that today's pensions are basically paid for in futures.
Yeah,
it's not some like massive money that they've all been contributing to through their lives. Like that's gone.
When did you become aware of that? Because I mean, I think like it's basically rational for people of our age to say we probably won't get a state pension, right?
Well, I think if we do, it'll be. I mean, who knows? I mean, this could be 40 years away, and I think kind of all bets are off. But on current trends, it will be totally. Of course, we won't have the level of state handouts that kind of our parents and grandparents have enjoyed. Something will have to just shift paradigmatically for that to be true, like some economic revolution.
Well, but it can't, and I mean, and that was actually the good criticism of that abundance idea, that the problem of trying to sell abundance to like the Democratic Party in the US, but also to the Labour Party here, we must be less America focused, is that a lot of the people voting for the Labour Party, I mean, what the private school students,
this was pretty funny.
Are now most likely to vote. Are the only
turkeys
group
voting for Christmas table.
Are the only group who are now voting for the Labour Party, like as its favoured party. But critically, it's your public sector workers who are, again, those like special interests who are protected and for whom greater like supply side reform would act as like a shock and would threaten the like comfortable sinecures that they've built up for themselves.
I think this is silly and cynical. What harm does it do your salaryman, civil servant, drone for there to suddenly be more housing in this country?
Because it means that all those like planning consultants, all the like environmental consultants, all the people who
I see. If they're in the kind of lawyer,
yeah, I mean, I think and civil servants maybe slightly less. I mean, we've got a friend who is in the civil service who has been very explicit that the way you succeed is by building your empire, building up your group of people who are under you, who pay their fealty to you, who owe you fealty, who and then when a task comes down the line, you're never rewarded for saying, oh no, I can do that with available resources. You say, yes, someone will need to fill my previous job and I'll need a whole load more people to do it. It's empire building and it makes sense. It's rational. But the problem is, a motivated minority in this case, with its hands on the tiller or on the throat of the state, whichever one you prefer, can act in a way that is damaging to the country as a whole.
I wonder whether now is the time for us to recruit a bunch of civil servants, junior civil servants, to make us a cup of tea.
Well, yes, exactly. To empire build, it would take them. We'll need 5 of them. We'll need a deputy director. We'll need a couple of G7s,
and someone to do the paperwork,
and someone to do the paperwork,
as well,
and 9 HR officials to go with it.
And what do you call it when you have to fill out this form for when you're about to do something putatively dangerous?
Well, risk assessment.
Yes. Oh, yes, a risk assessment of the boiling water. All right, listeners, we'll be back after the break. Our friends at Looking for Growth, LFG, have asked us to tell you, listeners, that they're having a big event.
And not just any old event. This is make or break. They on the 23rd of October in the evening.
If you don't go, the economy will stay in its stagnant state forever.
Specifically you, the listener listening to this podcast right now.
But if you do go, you will hear Matt Clifford, Dominic Cummings, Katie Lamb.
Tom is particularly fond of Katie Lamb.
I think she's lovely. Katie Lamb, Liv Bure, and Chris Curtis. They will be on Pyramid Stage on October the 23rd, Indigo at the O2 via the LFG website.
This is the first of their upcoming stadium tour. They will then be playing at the O2. They've done the O2. They'll be playing at Electric Avenue in Brixton. Where
Pyramid
else?
Stage, Glastonbury, and grudgingly, we might have to disclose that there will also be an appearance from our rival podcast hosts, James and Rebecca. Yeah,
who I'm sure will put in a.
I've never heard of them.
I never think about them at all.
But if you do go, then you'll get to listen to all of these wonderful people, and you'll help save Britain's economy.
So we will be there. We'll be beaming ourselves down from the KC3, and we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible there.
And we have another ad of sorts. This is one that I like to call LFP, or Let's Fucking Plug the Anglo-Futurism podcast. And this goes out to all you listeners who enjoy the show, help us grow it by saying on social media, or to your friends
or family WhatsApps,
or to your family WhatsApps, or even on your Signal messages, and GCHQ might read them.
Exactly. Because I've heard GCHQ very boring. They could really do with liven up
the day of your handler at GCHQ, or at the GRU, by saying that you love the Anglo-Futurism podcast and whatnot. And if you like us and are also deep-pocketed, you can also become a patrician benefactor. So, sponsor us, pay for extra rich mahogany in the bar on the KC3. We'll put a plaque up with your name.
You do that by going to anglofuturism.
Yeah, don't do that via LFG. Do that via anglofuturism.co.
Where you can sign up to get early previews of guest interviews and occasional bonus episodes.
Well, lucky listeners.
Lucky listeners. Yeah, well, I don't know. More of this.
Hear recordings of Calum singing in the shower. What do you want?
I'd pay to never have to hear this ever again. And with that, on with the show. Hello, listeners. This is a free preview episode. And if you want to listen to the full thing, you can subscribe at anglofuturism.co.
And if you go there, you'll also get early previews of guest interviews, occasional bonus episodes, and maybe even, Calum whistling, all that kind of jazz.
Whistling. You'll hear my 3-part rendition of The Men of Harlech.
I think I'm a better whistler than you.
I've never actually gone up against anyone.
But
who would judge?
You will have to subscribe to find out.